Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Championships are in full swing. We're trying to put the trophies on the shelves behind us. Woo! And this might be one of the most important videos that you watch all season long. I'm going to be breaking down my analysis for every wide receiver and every matchup for week 17 of the NFL season. But before we get into that, we got to pick a winner, because if you remember in last week's video, we were giving away an autographed Jalen Waddle jersey, and our winner, that was the worst drum roll of all time. We're just gonna, yeah, that was bad. In Rod 2324, longtime Alabama fan, and that Waddle jersey would look awesome in my office. And thanks to the Headliners for helping me make the playoffs. In Rod, congratulations on winning that jersey. Make sure you send us an email, info@thefantasyheadliners.com. info@thefantasyheadliners.com. Make sure you use the email associated with your YouTube account so we can get all your shipping information and get your package sent out right away. But we got to go, ladies and gentlemen. We've got so much to talk about. We've got so many different things happening this week. Who's going to win us some matchups? I've got a couple. I've got a couple of people that might do it. Let's kick it off with Thursday Night Football. Dallas at Tennessee. And this is just an absolutely smash matchup for CeeDee Lamb owners. Tennessee allows the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. CeeDee Lamb with back-to-back 120-yard games, and now we get this great matchup. CeeDee Lamb is probably going to be my wide receiver 1 or 2 this week. I would not be surprised if he ends up finishing that high up. Y'all are going to want to get him into your lineups. As far as we going over to the Tennessee Titans, I mean, Dallas does allow the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers, but you've got Malik Willis under center. And when Malik Willis is playing, it doesn't really matter a whole lot because they don't throw it that much. Now, in terms of starters sitting and things like that, I don't think Tennessee should really sit anybody, because does it do you a whole lot of good? You've got a long week anyway. You play on Thursday Night Football. Does it do you a whole lot of good to potentially get yourself just wrecked by Dallas and then have to try and turn around and then go and face Jacksonville and get a win to make it into the playoffs next week? No, go for it this week. Let's get a win this week. Let's get ourselves feeling good. You've got a long week anyway, and then we can bounce back. But for me, Treylon Burks still would not be a start this week, because with Malik Willis being under center, they just don't throw it that often. Arizona and Atlanta. And if you had DeAndre Hopkins or Marquise Brown on your roster last week, you either didn't play them, or if you did, you were greatly let down. Luckily for you, Colt McCoy sounds like he will be back this week, and he will be the starter for Arizona. That makes DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown both fantasy viable for me at that point. Now, they will have a lower ceiling, but you should at least be able to throw them out there and know that the ceiling is a lot higher than it was last week. At least the floor is higher than their ceiling last week. So I'm still okay going with both of these guys. Hopkins having a little bit more of a safer floor than Brown. Maybe Brown having a little bit more upside if they can find like a deep play with him. As far as Drake London goes from Atlanta, he's going to be the only wide receiver I'm starting. The dude has looked fabulous the last 3 weeks. He's got 30 targets over his last 3 games. In those games, he's got over 70 yards in all 3 of them and over 90 in 2 of those 3. So the volume is 100% going to be there. They're not throwing it nearly that much. They're running the ball like 30 times a game right now. But with Desmond Ridder really locked onto Drake London, both of those guys, they're feeling it. They're feeling good. And that makes Drake London a fantasy viable start, even if the upside isn't there because the touchdowns haven't been there yet. Chicago and Detroit. And for the Bears, I mean, if you're desperate, you could go with Dante Pettis. Detroit does allow the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. But if you're playing Pettis, like you're hoping for a touchdown, like that's the only thing that you're getting from this. Now, if Chase Claypool were to end up playing this week, which as of this recording, no word on him as of yet, if Dante Pettis is the only guy out there, that's the touchdown upside for me. Not really Brian Pringle. I mean, obviously it'd be Cole Kmet more than anybody, but that's a different position. But Dante Pettis would be very, very touchdown dependent. For Detroit, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You know he's going to be an absolute start for us. And even though the numbers for DJ Chark don't add up to 15, it doesn't matter. I'm still going with DJ Chark this week. He has 90-plus yards in 3 of his last 4 games. He is 100% a start for me. He's going to have the targets. The Lions play much better at home. The offense is much better at home. Offense is going to do work this week. Jacksonville and Houston, and Houston still allows the 4th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, but I still like Jacksonville bouncing back this week. They've already said, Doug Peterson has already said, they are playing the starters. They are playing to win this game. They do not want to lose a game going into week 18 against Tennessee. They want to keep the momentum going, and I think that is the best call that they could make here. Zay Jones goes back to being a start for me. Christian Kirk goes back to being a start for me. Maybe they don't have the ceiling that we've been used to over the last few weeks, with the exception of last week, but for me, there's still guys that are going to see plenty of volume. Then for the Houston Texans, I mean, Cooks came back last week, had a touchdown, looked pretty good. Davis Mills has been playing really, really well down the stretch here as well. This is a decent matchup. Cooks has nice touchdown upside and will be a start for me. Denver and Kansas City, and even in the cluster, that was the last game. I had to put the beep in there myself. I was worried that maybe Taylor wouldn't catch it and beep it out for me. But in that cluster of a game, Jeudy was still fantasy viable. He was still a guy that if you started him, he gave you startable points. And honestly, Courtland Sutton was pretty darn close to it as well. He was only a couple of points away, and he had 7 targets. We've got a matchup now going up against Kansas City. This is a little bit of a better matchup, even though Kansas City completely shut down Seattle last week. This is a better matchup for Denver this week. Now, it's going to be risky, and you're going to watch the game, and your heart is probably going to stop several times. You're probably going to get anxiety-ridden. You're probably going to get very frustrated when you look at the numbers, but by the time the end of the game comes, I would not be surprised if both of these guys had anywhere from 8 to 12 fantasy points. Now, for the rest of this team, though, for the rest of the game, for the Kansas City Chiefs, Denver allows the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. And Kansas City spreads the ball around so much, you have to hope for a touchdown. Really what we're going to see this week is a lot of Travis Kelce, and then those really quick end around type of plays that we see with Kadarius Toney and Mecole Hardman. But with them both being healthy, I can't pick one of them to start. If Kadarius Toney wasn't healthy, I would start Mecole Hardman this week, but I can't. So I'm not starting any of them because it is going to be a tougher matchup. And when you take a look at all of it together and how much you spread the ball around, there's just way too much risk for me to head into this week. Miami, New England, even with Teddy Bridgewater, Hill and Waddle should not go to your bench. Teddy Bridgewater will be able to get the ball to both of these guys. And really, he can do exactly what this offense is designed to do. The quick routes, the over the middle, the out, everything that we need. We don't need to launch the ball deep for big plays to happen. Did you see the Jalen Waddle play last week? They could strike from anywhere. And going up against New England, do we really think they're going to get up super early? New England's defense is, a lot better than their offense. They're probably going to stifle the Miami offense at times. So we're not going to see like a blowout game, which is good because we want Waddle and Hill to get consistent targets throughout the game. I'm going to start both of them. Jacoby Myers will be a start for me as well. New England's going to have to throw the ball to be able to beat Miami this week, and I guarantee you they're going to want to take down Miami and ruin their playoff chances. Indianapolis and the New York Giants, and Pittman right now for Indianapolis is really their only fantasy viable player. And the offense has been absolute crap, and he doesn't have a whole lot of upside. He's getting the targets. He's getting more than enough targets to be fantasy viable, but there's really no big plays for him. And because of that, you're getting a bunch of targets. You're catching a majority of them, but you're averaging 7-8 yards a carry or 7-8 yards a catch. There's no upside there, and he's not scoring. So for me, he's more of like a wide receiver 3 start. If you're looking for upside this week, Pittman may not be it. Now, for the New York Giants, as you see here, their matchup is listed as a 1. And neither Isaiah Hodgins or Darius Slayton reach 15 fantasy points. So you might be saying, Kyle, why are we starting them? Well, during the season, over the course of a full season, The Indianapolis Colts have allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. That's a pretty good number. Over the last 2 weeks, though, they've allowed the 2nd most. Over the last 4 weeks, the most. The secondary is getting just absolutely shredded right now. This is a team that just is not playing with any confidence on either side of the ball. I expect Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins to both be absolutely fine. For me, Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins are touchdown-dependent wide receiver 2 upside plays this week. Hodgins probably a little bit safer. Slayton a little bit more upside. New Orleans and Philadelphia and Chris Olave plays this week. Then I will roll with Chris Olave, but it's going to depend on how the hammy looks. If he's even limited, even a little bit, I probably skip out on him. This is a tougher matchup, and I don't want to throw him out there and run into a T. Higgins-esque situation where he tries to give it a go, the hamstring just doesn't feel great, and then he sits the rest of the game. So if he's limited this week in any capacity, he is a sit for me, even though as of right now, we still don't know for sure if he's playing. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith continued to ball out, even with Gardner Minshew last week, had great games going up against New Orleans. This is a very similar matchup to what we saw last week. I'm going to go with both of these guys. Again, they need a win. They need a win to get that first round bye still, okay? That is still up in the air, and a first round bye would do a lot of good with Jalen Hurts banged up right now. Now, Jalen Hurts is going to try and play this week. Don't know if he will. Me personally, going up against New Orleans, Gardner Minshew did just fine last week. Let him go out there again, hopefully get the win at home against New Orleans, seal up that first round bye, and then at that point, Jalen Hurts has got a couple of weeks to rest. Carolina and Tampa Bay, and DJ Moore is going to be a risky play for me in this matchup, but Carolina needs this win. If they want to get into the playoffs, they have got to get a win, and they're likely not going to do it like they did against Detroit last week running the football. I can guarantee Tampa Bay's defense is not going to give up those runs. They're going to need to pass it to get it there. DJ Moore has 70 or more receiving yards in 3 of his last 4 games. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I just say the name and it makes you shiver a little bit. You get a bad taste in your mouth. You have horrible flashbacks. They haven't done anything as of recently. Godwin is the safer of the 2 plays here, with Mike Evans having a little bit more upside for me. It's not that bad of a matchup for these guys. I'm going to be okay taking a shot here. Plus a little bit of an incentive-based thing here. Mike Evans, he's 84 yards away from having 9 consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons to begin a career. I guarantee Tom Brady knows that, and Tom Brady is going to get Mike Evans what he needs so we can get him over that hump and he can keep that streak going. Cleveland and Washington will bring me to my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Make sure you head over to manscaped.com, use code word headliners, and you get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. Manscaped.com. Cleveland and Washington. Cooper hasn't provided a ton of fantasy relevant numbers as of recent, but he's been very consistent with yards and target, even when you look at it and you say, he hasn't won me a whole lot of matchups. If you played him, you probably haven't lost matchups because of him either. So that's not bad. I think he finds the end zone this week, and there's also big touchdown potential for Donovan Peoples-Jones as well. Hopefully we get some nicer weather for Cleveland. They've dealt with some crap weather as of late. Hopefully we get a little bit nicer weather, get to unleash these 2 guys. For the Washington Commanders, McLaurin's absolutely locked in. Absolutely locked in. Now, Cleveland does allow the 8th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, which isn't great. We would like it to have a little bit more. But really, for me, when I talk about Cleveland and that, I just mentioned the weather a second ago, right? The reason that they've kind of slipped into the 8th fewest spot is because of the teams and the weather that they have faced as of recent. They haven't played in great weather games, and because of that, it's helped their defense quite a bit. Especially against the pass. So we've seen them, those numbers look a little bit better. They're a little bit inflated if you asked me. I am still okay with both of these guys. Now, just recently announced right before I started recording this video, Carson Wentz actually is going to be the starter for this game. Now, at the beginning of the year, Carson Wentz and Terry McLaurin didn't really click a whole lot. Am I a little bit worried about that? Yeah, it does worry me about his upside. But The thing about McLaurin right now is that he has got 3 straight games with 70 or more yards and 2 touchdowns in 2 of his last 3 games. A touchdown in 2 of his last 3 games. So McLaurin's been playing very well. My hope is that him and Wentz can actually get together. Now for Jahan Dotson, he's got touchdowns in 3 straight games. And I mentioned this in the waiver wire video, right? For Jahan Dotson, to begin the season, he had 4 touchdowns in 4 games with, you guessed it, Carson Wentz at quarterback. We've got breaking news in the San Francisco and Las Vegas matchup. First, for San Francisco, it does sound like Deebo's going to return to practice this week. However, I'm still not expecting him to play. Brandon Ayuk going up against Las Vegas, not that bad of a matchup. I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk. Him and George Kittle should absolutely control this offense once again. With Christian McCaffrey, again, maybe just being kind of, just looked at, just monitored in terms of workload. For Las Vegas, though, just announced that Derek Carr will not be starting either of the final 2 games of the season. They are going to go with Jarrett Stidham instead, and one of the reasons why is because Josh McDaniels wants to see what they have in terms of their youth at quarterback. What does it really mean, though? If something were to happen to Derek Carr and in his off-season physical, he does not pass it, he gets $40 million guaranteed. This is absolutely 100% Las Vegas not sitting Derek Carr so they don't risk an injury and have to pay him $40 million guaranteed and lock him in at quarterback. This to me signals that they are seriously considering moving on from Derek Carr, which makes no sense because Derek Carr is not your problem. Anyway, surprisingly, the 49ers do allow the 6th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. For me, I'm going to start Davante Adams and only Davante Adams. I don't care who the backup quarterback is. I don't care who's playing. I am going with Davante Adams. Okay? He's an elite player. He's an elite talent. And you have to expect that when your backup quarterback is in, he's going to be looking to your best player as much as possible. Now, does he have the top 3, 4, 5 wide receiver upside? Probably not. But he is still going to be a guy that will be a low-end wide receiver 1 for me. New York Jets and Seattle, and rejoice, Jets fans. Mike White is back. We don't have to worry about Zach Wilson this week. And for those of you out there that need to start Garrett Wilson, boom. Here's your chance. Even though Seattle allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, doesn't matter to me. I am running out Garrett Wilson this week, knowing that him and Mike White have been absolutely on the ball together since White took over as starter. For DK Metcalf, right now he's going to be a start, but he is going to be kind of more like a high-end wide receiver 2 risk play for me. New York allows the 2nd fewest fantasy points. And if you don't have Tyler Lockett, if Marquise Goodwin is still banged up, Tyler Lockett is going to be the sole guy, DK Metcalf is going to be the sole guy that the defense will be looking to, and that worries me. Minnesota and Green Bay, and roll out the points in this matchup right now. Green Bay allows the 7th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but who cares? Justin Jefferson is going to be a start for you. Just over 200 yards away from breaking the single-season receiving yards record held by Calvin Johnson. Justin Jefferson, good luck to you. You could have a big game right here and really lock yourself in to take care of that in the final week of the season. For Adam Thielen, though, he's a sit. TJ Hawkinson has taken over as that number 2 target. I'm not interested in Adam Thielen this week. KJ Osborne, he's been running a few more routes as of recent. Adam Thielen is just, he is starting to fade away at this point. He's been fantasy viable for so long, and we appreciate what he's done, but he just doesn't have it right now. For the Green Bay Packers, a lot hinges on Christian Watson. Minnesota allows the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, but Christian Watson is not practiced as of this recording due to a hip injury. So does he even play this week? If he doesn't, it makes our lives and situation a lot easier because we play Allen Lazard and we play Romeo Doubs, and that's just how it is. But if Christian Watson does play this week, if he's not limited by the end of the week, then Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Lazard all become starts for me, with Watson and Doubs being guys that are high risk, high upside plays, and Allen Lazard is a low ceiling, touchdown dependent, high floor play. So there's a lot of different things that could happen. Keep an eye on the rankings when we hear more about Watson. The Rams and the Chargers allow the 5th fewest fantasy points per game, but that doesn't matter because you weren't starting a wide receiver for the Rams anyway. For the Chargers, with Williams and Allen healthy and playing, plus targets to Austin Eckler, it's made Josh Palmer basically irrelevant at this point. So we can't do anything with Josh Palmer. But here's just a reminder, if you own Keenan Allen, since he returned from injury in week 11, he is the wide receiver 8. Pittsburgh and Baltimore, and even though I feel really gross about it, and if I had Diontae Johnson and really any other wide receiver listed as a start in this video, I'd probably sit Diontae Johnson. He is going to be a start this week based on the numbers. He is a low ceiling, high wide receiver 3 floor play though. This guy doesn't have much upside for you. If he gives you 7 or 8 targets, he's probably going to give you 60 or 70 receiving yards with no touchdowns, and that is not good for your fantasy lineup this week. If you've got guys with higher upside, you're going to go with Diontae Johnson. George Pickens will be a start for me. He is absolutely a wide receiver 2 touchdown play this week. I like what I see from him and Kenny Pickett. For the Ravens, I mean, Pittsburgh allows the 5th most fantasy points, but it doesn't matter because they can't pass it. They're not healthy. It's just gross. Monday Night Football, Cincinnati and Buffalo, and this might be one of the most anticipated matchups of the season. This is going to be one heck of a game. Stefon Diggs, definitely starting him, not sitting Stefon Diggs. Yeah, he put up a crap game last week, but we're going right back to him this week. I am going to go with Gabe Davis as well this week. He's got at least 6 targets in all but 5 games this season. There is some big upside touchdown play for him this week and a potential shootout, a lot of back and forth. I could see Gabe Davis escaping for a big play or a touchdown this week. He will be a risky start for me, but a start nonetheless. And then for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I mean, they could do some serious damage this week. This is a Buffalo defense that has had a lot of trouble stopping the pass this season. They don't have the pass rusher in Von Miller anymore, so they've had trouble creating pressure as of recent. So with all of that said, these guys are going to have a really, really good week this week. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. That's all the wide receiver analysis for this week. Hit the like button for me on the way out. Subscribe if you're new here to the channel. I'm going to get going though. All of you stay safe and healthy. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.